That's a beautiful deer, Jesse.
Hey, folks, I'm Jesse with Carolina Whitetails, and I appreciate you checking us out for another episode of Indoors Edition. My guest today is a wildlife biologist with a PhD in deer behavior and management, and the host and founder of Growing Deer TV, a weekly online show. And I'm glad to have him here to talk with me. Dr. Grant Woods, how are you, sir?
I'm great, Jesse. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking a little time and talking with me. I'm sure most people in the hunting community are familiar with you and your videos, but for the ones that don't, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're from?
Sure. I was raised in Missouri on a small farm back in the day. The hedgerows were kind of the enemies, and there were lots of quail and rabbits around, but there were no deer where I was raised. And when I was 6 years old, I was running my little trap line. I had rabbit traps, and I found a female fawn in a little field that had been poached. It had shot heads the night before. I went down my dad, and we drug it up to our hog house. It was in the winter, it's cold, skinned it out, and that was my first real sighting of a deer and touching a deer, and I've been hooked on deer ever since. I've always, my whole life and career, been based around deer.
What was the reason for there not being that many deer in the area?
Yeah, of course, North Carolina had no deer season several years ago. Deer had been taken out by two things, just destructive habitat. I remember most of the South was cotton fields, literally, and the Midwest had been cleared for farming, and as that, they burned out the land by bad practices and timber and brush come back. The remnant populations of deer started reproducing, of course, or building populations, and then state agencies trapped them and what's called the restoration effort. And in Missouri, they really trapped deer out of three places and had stalked them in the county where I was raised, and I saw one of those deer they let loose, and unfortunately, someone poached that deer. But restoration occurred all throughout America. There were no areas that just had huntable populations all through. Interesting for you to learn that Pennsylvania was the first state that had a legal deer season in America, and the first state that hired a game warden.
Do you know what year that was?
Yeah, I don't recall, but Pennsylvania, so I think it's like 90 or 100 years ago. They were way ahead of most states. In Missouri, they started restalking deer a little bit in the 40s, 50s, 60s. We're still stalking deer in the early 70s. So we're, in historical times, we're just not that long in what we call modern deer.
That's pretty interesting. Now, your show, Growing Deer TV, can you tell us how that came about?
Yeah, sure can. Of course, I'm a wildlife biologist. I schooled in Missouri and then Georgia and Clemson, and I've always consulted. I thought I'd teach at school, but I didn't like that too much, so I really consulting and trapping a lot. I have a friend, Bill Winky, and Bill, before I started going deer, about a year, he started Midwest Whitetails. And Bill and I are buddies. He asked me to kind of be on his show and kind of do the wildlife side or the technical side. Just decided, heck, might as well do our own. And so we started growing deer before the internet or online shows were popular at all. And started making a show every week, 52 weeks out of the year. So now, 11 plus years, we've made at least one new show every week. We've never missed a week and never had a repeat. Just doing that, you build up a large audience. There's people like that. We film it this week at Eric and next. It's current. And so, when we're planting or burning or turkey hunting or deer hunting, it relates to a lot of people out there. And unlike maybe TV shows that film this year and Eric the next year. And so anyway, it was just, I thought maybe a way to stay home for, but that hasn't worked out because we're still traveling and we just do it all. We travel and make a new show every week.
can you tell us a little bit about the proving grounds?
Yeah, absolutely. So my wife Tracy and I we're living actually down by Abbeville, South Carolina, big hunting area. And we're both farm kids, and we're living on 13 acres. I had a food plot there, a couple ladder stands, but wanted some more land. And we looked around the south. Tracy's a Southern Belle. She's from the Charlotte area, a little town called Monroe. And anywhere around, and I've traveled a lot, so anywhere within a dark after where I was up there for, we just couldn't afford any land. And we were back in those Ozark Mountains seeing my parents just on a little vacation day, seeing my parents. And Tracy and I had a little date day, and we went out, looked for ice cream, and we got an ice cream, and I walked across the little highway looking at some stuff. And Tracy picked up a real estate guy at the ice cream shop and said, "Here's a ranch for sale, there's some acreage for sale." So we called the realtor, and that's how God got us there. And the land for the Midwest used to anyway was so much less expensive than the East Coast, and a lot fewer people. And so it was a burnt out cattle ranch. It was just horrible shape, but it's what we could afford. And for 20 years, we've just been really working on improving it, making significant habitat improvements. And we went from the first year, it's literally a seeing one deer the first year to growing Boone and Crockett deer now. So it just has been really fun to watch the habitat improve and see the deer numbers and the herd and the quality, the number of fawns and the antler size improved. It's just really been a lot of fun to watch tonight.
I found this very, very interesting. I know you plant food plots on the proving grounds, but I saw where you don't use a plow or a disc to plant it. So how do you plant the food plot?
We haven't disced anything in 20 plus years. I don't own a disc. I don't have a work with anyone to disc. Every time you disc, 100% time with zero exceptions. This is hard for some folks to accept because, they disc and their granddad disc and great granddad had a horse and a plow and he disc. But when you turn the soil like that, you're always harming it. You're letting way too much oxygen in there. God never meant there to be that much oxygen in the soil. Only while kind of went into dung beetle holes and earthworm holes. And that's called oxygenation. Of course, we know that's the way we can decompose metal or, really destructive stuff. Well, it does the same thing, those elements in the soil. And it kills most of the beneficial microbes in the soil. And just the physical act of disking, where it kills earthworms, sets up their den, sets them in half, whatever. And so we've taken our place, which was just a rock bed, and turned it into, deep, black, organic matter in our food plots. Everywhere else is still a rock bed. And grow really, really high quality crops. And we call that the release process. We started calling it the buffalo system, and as we've learned more at our farm and other people's farms that we work, we've just seen how much of the potential we can release. So we call that the release process. And I just got my soil test back this year. I soil test every year, but I've not needed to add any lime or fertilizer in 8 years. There's been none added. So if you watch our show, really lush food plots or big antler deer, we're growing all that without spending any money on lime or just by letting the soil express its full potential.
Yeah, that's just another one of those things that I just find very interesting, because I think myself as well as other hunters just assume, for whatever reason, that you have to have big tractors and big equipment to grow a good food plot.
Yeah, especially, where I am, where there's no burnout cattle rancher in the South, of course, and I know this because, again, I did a lot of schooling at Clemson, but in South Carolina, as an example, and this would be true throughout all the Piedmont Belt states, but basically just south of Washington, D.C., all the way around to eastern Texas, that was all cotton country. And the average topsoil loss in South Carolina is 17 inches during that era. So there's 17 inches of topsoil washed out into the Atlantic Ocean due to bad farming practices, plowing and stuff. And they didn't know any better at the time. I'm not mad at them. They certainly didn't know any better, but we do know better now. And when we read the earliest explorers' notes, they never mentioned red clay because it wasn't visible. It was covered by black organic matter. There's no mention of red clay.
Yes,
So
yeah.
The off subsoil or the deer rises not topsoil. And that's a real challenge.
So do you normally just do the prescribed fire and then just broadcast your seed, or how do you usually?
Well, that's one technique, or we use a no-till drill, or we've had some cold weather very recently. We've just been frost seeding to build the seed out. As the ground thaws and freezes, it will tuck up small seeds like clover seed or something like that. So a lot of techniques folks can use. And if you're a little bit bigger scale, you're going to use a no-till drill. The no-till drill basically, what it says, there's no tillage. It just makes a little split in the ground and drops the seed at an appropriate place. There's no turning the soil over. And in our case, we don't want to remove that existing vegetation. We're going to leave it there, just like the Great Prairies, and then terminate that with a crimper, which is just a roller with blades on there that will break the stem of the plant. It doesn't cut them. Because if you cut most plants, like think about cutting grass in the yard, they just go back, right? You got to kill the circulatory system. That's what a crimper does. And that way we don't have to use herbicide and all that. Now that vegetation becomes mulch, like you might have in your flower bed, and that keeps weeds at bay. And as that mulch decomposes, it's the perfect slow release fertilizer. So that's just a 30,000 foot view of what we do, and it's just replicating a very natural process that's extremely efficient at conserving water, conserving soil. There's zero erosion, and keeping the soil cool when it's hot outside. It's what things will grow better. Just many benefits.
Now, because you have a PhD in deer behavior, I'm sure you've watched and studied your fair share of deer, and trail cameras is a good tool to do that. Now, I read that you was involved in the innovation of trail cameras. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was doing my master's research project on stray behavior by literally setting up the trees. Just like hunting, except I used a notepad and a pencil to observe what I was watching. And the Safari Club International had invited me to give a speech about what I was learning about deer behavior. Man, I was young and went up to this big group of hunters. I was very nervous. This was back in the day of slideshows, not PowerPoint like we have now. I gave my presentation, just took a few pictures of deer and strays. So you got to remember, back at that point, there were very few deer and very few people had ever seen a deer in a strait. We didn't really know what happened at strait. That was part of my thesis, describing what happened at a strait. And I gave my presentation. I went back and sat down. I was just extremely nervous. A young kid, 9 or 10 years old, came up, pumped me on the shoulder. Said, "Hey, my dad wants to see you out in the hallway." And I thought I'd done something wrong. I thought I was going to the principal's office or something. I go out there. This guy introduced himself, and he was an infrared engineer. And he explained to me that he had created this device that shot an infrared beam from the sender to receiver. And when that beam was broken, it would trigger a camera. Now, this is back in, film days when you had 36 pictures, and the battery was about like a car battery, and squirrels ate the wires. And, it was very crude compared to the cheapest trail cameras today. But it was state of the art at the time, just trial and error. And so he asked me if I wanted to try one. Of course, I said sure, and started getting pictures of deer and strays, and just really took the science at that time much faster forward. It's a paradigm shift in which you get a new tool like the microscope and then an electron microscope or whatever. That's kind of what trail cameras were to studying deer, wild ranking deer. And I learned a lot. And at the same time, because I was the only guy that was using these in the woods, again, this gentleman was an engineer, so I was able to give him feedback. Well, this works, but this doesn't work. Well, if we did this, it would be better. And he and I partnered up, and that became a camera company way back in the day. It's long gone, called Trailmaster. And then it was active infrared. And today, most trail cameras are passive. They just sense motion or sense heat, depending on which camera brand. These are active. You had to line up a beam and the timber and whatnot. But here was state of the art. And I published my research on that. That got a lot of attention. And so, yeah, the guy I was partnered with, Mr. Goodson, actually got the first patent on stalking. So I was young, didn't know anything about attorneys. I thought I'd be a wealthy guy by now, but I didn't make any money, but I sure did some good research.
I saw where you were involved in a study on this, and I was wondering, can you tell us, are deer colorblind?
Yeah. No, deer are definitely not colorblind. And my good friend, Dr. Carl Miller at University of Georgia, did the bulk of that research. So I want to give Carl a shout out there. Carl's a brilliant researcher. But no, deer are definitely not colorblind. They see further in the blue spectrum the color than we do. Probably see the blue infrared pretty good. So, hunting blue jeans would not be the best idea out there. And they don't see as far in the red spectrum. So you can wear hunter's orange, and deer they see kind of a gray. They don't see orange like we see at all. It's so silly for people who don't want to wear hunter's orange to risk the safety factor of not wearing hunter's orange. But deer don't see that. They see really well. They just see a different portion of the color spectrum than we do. But of course, the best camo is what I call a can of sit seal. Deer are designed to see movement. They're not worried about seeing the color of a predator. They want to see the predator moving or coming to them. So they see movement extremely well. They got those great big eyes, and they're set on the side of their heads because predators tend to attack from the rear or the side, not head on. And we humans we are predators, so our eyes are set forward so we can see what we're going after.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, no, deer are definitely not colorblind, and deer have memory. So again, Dr. Miller, Carl Miller, University of Georgia, just retired. Did some great work where they had 10 deer in captivity, and had color monitors, and then a corn feeder right in front of the monitor just had it, and the lid would go up or down on a motion sensor, and so they would train deer to react to different colors. It's like they would learn that there's yellow on the monitor, then they could go stick their head in the corn feeder and the lid would not slap them in the nose. But if it was green and they stuck their head in there, then the lid would slap them in the nose. Well, that's pretty easy. You can teach a dog or anything that. But then the real secret that Carl's great work was he would wait a month and then show them yellow so they could remember. And I won't share all the details of his research, but deer have memory. About like humans, older deer have more memory until they get senile. If the deer lives long enough, they get senile just like humans. And so deer have memory. So when you alert your deer from near stand, it smells you. That's the primary way to alert deer is our scent. Then that deer is probably going to avoid it for a few days. So it's most people hunt deer, and they don't realize that deer have memory and they avoid danger. They're very conditioned to avoid danger. So our presence can be a big deterrent to deer using areas. Lots and lots of research on that.
Now, I want to ask you about scent control. I know you take that pretty serious, and I think all hunters should. And I wonder what's your opinion on these scent elimination devices? Do you think they work?
Well, yes and no. So the number one scent we produce is our breath, respiration. And there's no device that controls that I'm aware of. You'd have to breathe in the hand. So you're blowing out warm, moist scent. And warm, moist scent can travel a long, long way. So I do. I spray my boots down. They're decode, and I store my clothes where I think they're not getting scent on them. But once I'm in the stand, and that kind of gives me protection getting to my stand or blind. But once I get to where I'm going, I'm spending any amount of time there. I'm breathing all the time, and I'm just putting out a huge volume of scent. It's right the air current in that area. And that's why no matter what scent control you use, once you get to where you're going, hunting the wind, hunting where the wind's not going to swirl is extremely important.
Well, what about the ozonics, those things that are supposed to
so ozone will definitely bust up scent molecules, but what I've seen I've observed, I've not researched this, and I think most people agree, most of the hunters I know, you know, the big hunters, is if the wind is swirling, ozone is really heavy, and it's not going to swirl with it. So if you've got the ozone raining out over your head, and you're breathing, and the wind swirls a little bit left or right, well, your scent's just going around the ozone. The ozone, you know, your scent is way lighter, the real heavy ozone molecule. Now, if you're in a blind, and you've only got one window open, a hard blind, you know, with glass windows, you've only got one window open, and you got the ozone blowing out that window. Probably doing a decent job of breaking up most of your scent. But if you're in a tree stand and the wind's swirling, probably not going to be quite as successful.
Well, Grant, I really appreciate you talking with me here for a little bit. And can you tell us like where we can find you on social media?
Yeah, just look for Grant Woods or Growing Deer. If you search on either one of those two, you'll find us no problem. And on the videos, just any platform, basically any online platform, whether it's YouTube or growingdeer.com or Roku or Apple or Amazon, any of those Waypoint, Carbon TV, you can find Growing Deer.
All right. Well, again, I really appreciate you giving me a little bit of time to talk with you. Folks, I appreciate you watching us, and make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and keep following Carolina Whitetails. I appreciate it.